to the IAG podcast, our second podcast. Took us a little bit of while to get from the first to the second podcast because it's been a busy time, but the first one was received so well, and we're here for our second. And I'm very, very happy to welcome the chairman of Murray International, Mr. Niall Murray. Hello, Niall.
Hello, thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, thank you for being our very special guest. And I'm joined, of course, by IAG's managing editor, Ben Blaschke. Hi, Ben.
Good morning or afternoon or evening or wherever you might be at this time, everyone.
And we're all in this post-COVID world, we're all geographically disparate. I'm in Macau, Ben's in Sydney, and Niall, you're in Mongolia, yeah?
I'm in Ulaanbaatar, the capital of Mongolia.
In UB. Not to be confused with Inner Mongolia in China, of course. The
no.
We're talking the country in between Russia and China. So we won't waste any time on introductions. We'll let you do that, Niall. So just to kick it off, actually, I should mention to listeners that the idea of these podcasts is to get to know the names behind the people behind the names. So often we have names in the gaming industry in Asia, and we see these people come up, but maybe you don't know their backstories or get to know them a little bit. So this is like three guys at a pub having a drink and talking about old times. So let's get into it. So Niall, your story. How did you get into the gaming business? You're obviously Irish. How did you find yourself?
Yes.
Las Vegas and Macau and all of that.
Oh, interesting. I've always wanted to travel and move around, but I was born in Dublin, Ireland, and I was always interested in the hospitality industry. It showed to me that there was a lot of opportunities around the world in the most beautiful places, and service industries was the thing on the rise. So I decided to go to Trinity College in Dublin and then specialized in hotel restaurant management. And then on graduation, I headed off to Paris. I started working with Disney in Paris. I had a very fortunate interview where one of the top executives from Disney came to Dublin, and he only did about 4 interviews at our college, but there was a number of other interviewees who were insisting that people would be fluent in French before they got an opportunity there. Well, this individual didn't speak any French, and I was lucky enough to interview with him. So we got on like a house on fire, and he offered me an opportunity to do a hotel internship at Disney, which is a full rotation to learn all the different departments and to go around and work in all the different places in Disney with only about 3 or 4 words of French, which proved to be difficult within the first couple of months. But had a wonderful experience there. I was there for about 4 years and learned the ins and outs of the hotel business, Disney style, which is very good at doing very large operations very consistently. And it was a huge operation. It was the first big opening of its type ever in Europe. You know, they opened up 5,600 hotel rooms all at once, and the major theme park and all the infrastructure that went with it. So it was quite a big operation. So I learned a lot of tricks of the trade there for doing stuff really big. Then I got the offer of the green card to go to America. Now you have to take that up within 3 months or you're going to lose it. So I headed off to New York. And one of my professors back in hotel school always told me, if you want to be the best, try and work for the best companies you possibly can. So I headed off to New York. I did 2 interviews. One of them was with the Ritz-Carlton in Central Park South. And I got offered a job there as a duty manager, hotel manager at the Ritz-Carlton. And a dual role I had was what they call a certified quality engineer, because Ritz-Carlton has this process called they're the only hotel company in the hotel business that has Malcolm Baldrige Award certification, which is all this very, very detailed mapping of processes, ensuring you've got 6 Sigma, etc. And so I learned that whole process with Ritz-Carlton. That was great. Then I got an opportunity with the Four Seasons in New York. So I moved over to New York, Four Seasons Hotel on 57th Street. Wonderful experience there. Another 5-star, 5-diamond hotel, but with a whole different way of getting to it. Different SOPs, different standard operating procedures. I got a call then from a headhunter asking me if I'd be interested to head to for an interview in Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. And I'd been reading about it. I'd been looking at the size of the operations there, and I thought, wow, this is an opportunity. And went over, did the longest interview of my life. It started at 8 a.m. in the morning. I met with 12 different people. By 8 o'clock that night, I completed the interviews. And they said, well done, Mr. Murray, thank you very much. Go and relax and have some dinner. So I went and relaxed, and I decided I'd have a nice glass of wine at the Bacchanal feast. And halfway through my dinner, one of the senior vice presidents noticed me and came over and said, Mr. Murray, your interview went very well. Can you right away fill out this application form? So me, with 3 or 4 glasses in me, set out to fill out my application form. And lo and behold, it worked. I must have made too many mistakes. I got offered the job and decided to move to Las Vegas to work at Caesar's Palace. I was in charge of training and development, and I had to do the hotel, food and beverage side, etc. And that was really interesting. Then they offered me a position to run the banquet department. So I was director of banquet operations. At that time, the Caesars was then taken over by Starwood. So a lot of changes were going to happen in Caesars. And I was offered an opportunity to join the Venetian pre-opening. So I went over there as director of performance training and development. Had great fun working there because I got to mingle with the big superstars like Sheldon Adelson and the top executives there, and writing the mission and the vision and values and all of that. So it was very, very exciting doing the very beginning, defining the culture of the Venetian, what it was, where we were going to go. And then I was given a number of special projects. Like if there was a big challenge going on, I was pretty good at standing in front of a group and directing the crowd and getting things going and moving them along. So I was in charge of doing the grand opening, and I perfected the process that we had used in the hotel business, the critical path process, which is basically all of the departments have massive to-do lists, and we bring them all together. We make sure that the ones that are most urgent are put in first and everything goes smoothly. And that basically it's like being the conductor of an orchestra. You know, everybody has the specialty. You have the specialists in table games and slots and hotel, but we have to just make sure where are we going and what time, and are we all in alignment so we all open in sync. And so I started to develop that process personally back in the late 98, and did a number of other big things, which was the opening of the Venezia. So the original Venetian was 3,000 rooms and a 1.2 million square foot convention space. And then like little additions of the Venetian included the Venezia, which is another 1,000 rooms. And so these processes would be massive in scale to normal hotel business, but in Vegas and in the Venetian, these were the norm. But they have to be run with military precision. So I learned a lot of different techniques to make that happen. 2004, the Sands, of course, was about to open, and they were running into a little bit of difficulty with the opening here in Macau. So they asked me if I would come over and help with the opening. And so I came out a couple of months before the opening of the original Sands, 2004, and put that process in place, and we pulled all the things together and basically got it ready for opening. It was an exciting opening. It was a fun day. We were all prepared and ready to open at a certain time. The crowd started gathering outside. We were ready about an hour before opening. We were making sure everything was double checked. And the guests decided to enter of their own accord. We weren't ready, but they burst the doors open, and it was just amazing. I was looking down from the 3rd floor, and a swarm of people came in. We had a line of 8 metal detectors downstairs, and the crowd just lifted up the metal detectors and moved them around as they ran up that escalator. So that was a bit of a scary time because we weren't prepared for what happened. But 40,000 people arrived that day, and there was a rumor sent out that the first 1,000 people who came in would get something like 20,000 Hong Kong dollars in chips for entering. So that stirred up a bit of a furore and got those people running in. So that was the big story of where I came from and how I got to Macau back in 2004.
So Niall,
Sorry,
Andrew, we hear a lot about, you know, Sheldon Adelson and what he's like to work for, and you know, obviously highly successful, and he's had a massive role in Vegas and Macau. From you having worked with him, first of all, what is he like to work for? And why do you think what is it about him that makes him so unique and successful?
He is a legend, and he is amazing to work with. You know, somebody was saying to me the other day, he said, do you ever get nervous? And I said, well, yeah, you have to have a little bit of butterflies in your stomach, because if you've got those butterflies in your stomach, it's always those moments from where you launch to something that's the most memorable thing in your life. And what I found with Sheldon Adelson, being around him, you always had those little rumbles in your tummy, because you never knew what he was going to ask you to do next. And he would push you to limits that you would never even dream of. In many, many cases, you'd be sitting there and thinking, that's impossible. How are we going to do that? He was so demanding. He was such a visionary, and he pushed. He's not a pushover. He's not somebody who's a lovely, huggy, cuddly man on the outside. He has a soft heart, and he's a very, very good person. But to work with, he is demanding. He would walk around the office and he would ask people straight out, what have you done for the organization today? And where are we on this project? And if you didn't have an answer, you'd really have to be ready with something to come up with that's solid. And it was great working in that environment, because you knew you really had to prove yourself every day and really had to move. There's some funny stories. Like I remember at the very beginning, there was a negotiation going on for the carpets throughout the Venetian. Big, huge contract. And the company came in and they asked for X amount of money. And basically, we went in and we're asking, what should we do? They're asking for this amount. And he said, you go in there and you offer them 1/5 of what they're asking for. And now, to me, in negotiations in the past, they normally said, well, if you ask for 20% off, 30% off, that's reasonable. He was actually offering 30% as opposed to 30% off. Or whatever. And I felt this was unrealistic. I felt it was a very difficult thing to accomplish. We went into the room, we discussed it with them, and he says, and you remind them of one thing, they need me more than I need them. And remind them of that. And then remind them, after you've told them that if they win the contract for the Venetian, this sale will allow them to sell their carpets for the rest of their careers, because you did the carpets at the Venetian, largest contract ever for integrated resorts. We went in and we got about 60% off the price in the end of the negotiation. I thought it was an unreasonable and tough negotiation, but for Sheldon, that's the way it's done. And it was amazing learning from that day. That's how he approached every single contract since, because that's what he expects. He's not going in looking for a 20% discount. He's saying, we're partnering on this and we're going to work together. And incidentally, a few years later, he bought that carpet company. He bought the looms for it and then produced all the carpets for every other IR in Vegas over the next few years. Genius.
Talk about vertical integration, right? And so,
Yeah.
just for people who don't know you so well, give some context to your career. So you're at Disney in Paris for 4 years, you said, yeah?
Yeah.
And then how long were you so then you went to the East Coast and then the West Coast. So how long at the East Coast, how long at the West Coast before you came to Macau in 2004?
So I was in Paris for just on 4 years, and then in New York for around 3 years. That brought me up then to come over to Vegas. I arrived in 97 in Vegas, and then joined the Venetian in 98, November 98. So I was in November 98 up to 2004 in the Venetian in Las Vegas doing their projects there.
So about 6 years. So it's quite a nice little sort of 4 years there, 3 years on the East Coast. And Ritz-Carlton, obviously a very famous brand, the whole ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen and all of that. One particular type of hotel. And then what about the change? You often hear in our industry, there are hotel guys and there are gaming guys. But when I first met you, I thought you were a gaming guy. I didn't know that you were a hotel guy. I mean, you've really taken on board gaming into your professional DNA in a way that other hotel guys haven't. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, I think it's odd. Some people say you're one or the other. We're doing integrated resorts. That turns out now. It wasn't out there years ago. We were doing mega resorts. Was when we built the Venetian back in Vegas. And the thing is, the skill set that we had developed in the hotel industry, doing massive openings and doing numerous openings, was missing when we arrived in Vegas. When I was in Caesar's Palace, that had been open since the late 60s. And the senior leaders and their methodology and project management wasn't in place. You had these guys with the little black books and red books who had these major VIPs on their list, and they were the super duper VIPs, and nobody would question them. And quite frankly, they did their thing, and that was it. A lot of these individuals weren't experienced in openings. They were maintainers. They'd been in the one property for 20 years, and they'd never opened up a whole thing at once. And Caesars, for example, built gradually. So what we found straight away is, okay, you know, the technical skills that were needed to open these huge places wasn't there. So what I had learned with Disney, who had been doing it for many, many years, was something quite unique. How do you do these massive places with huge volumes of people moving through them constantly and get it open in such a way that the service is extremely consistent, so nothing will step out of place or look out of place for the child? Those processes weren't really in there in Vegas for these massive openings. They were all, as I said, usually more gradual. So we took those frameworks and those methodologies, and we had to apply them and adjust them to 72 departments, including everybody, instead of just what would normally be hotel working in their silo, and then gaming doing, don't worry about it, buddy, we know what we're doing. Because what we found out is when it came to openings and getting these things synchronized, they weren't as synchronized as they could have been and should have been. So we pulled that together. So it became a mega resort model that I started to work on since '98. So that's for the whole operation. So how long do you have to be in a certain section or department before you become known as somebody who can do it? You know, so I think since '98 is a pretty long enough, you know, to understand everything. Now, you talk at the senior executives level and the technical level. So, you know, to be a hotel general manager, you don't have to be the best chef. However, you need to know what the output of a good chef is and what the key performance indicators are, etc. It's the exact same thing I feel for gaming. There are going to be technical experts in gaming and slots and table games. They need to drill down to the details. But what I need to do is know what the key performance indicators are, what needs to be done by when, and how we get this whole thing going and up and running. So I see myself as a generalist, but you have to know what each of the sections' performance needs to be and has to be and how to get there.
It seemed, sorry, Ben, I always want to push Niall a little bit on this. It seemed, because I think Niall's a really good example of this. It seemed to me you must have been, I don't know, young enough or open-minded enough or whatever it was to not stick in your comfort zone. Because when I talk to you about gaming, you really are like a gaming guy, and you understand that it's driven, like an IR is driven, the engine of profitability is the gaming part. Most hotel guys, they're very comfortable with hotels. They might have done their education in Switzerland or whatever, and they know their hotels, but not so much gaming side. And then the gaming guys tend to bitch a little bit about the hotel guys, you know. And it just seemed to me you were quite a rare example in our industry in Asia of somebody that really adopted that. And was there a particular person you learned from, or how did you go about learning gaming when you already had this knowledge of, as you say, mega resorts and hotels? How did that, you know, come about?
Well, I think that one of the things is I'm one of these multitaskers, but somebody would call it attention deficit disorder. I like to do 1,000 things at once. Like I was as a younger child, I was a swimmer. I swam in the nationals. I loved swimming, but it was too boring. It wasn't enough. So I decided I wanted to do something else. So I went into triathlons, right? So I could then do swimming and running and cycling, and that really got me going. And it was fun because I like to do that. I don't like to be a one-trick pony. I want to learn new things, master new skills, and really go for it. And I was quite individual in those tasks. It wasn't a team sport doing triathlons. But it's the same thing when I got into business. When I was doing one task, I'd always looking at the next person. How do you do that and how does that work? Because I'm absolutely passionate about what they taught me in Ritz-Carlton was everything is a process. So in the Ritz-Carlton, they have what they call 26 key processes. And they were like the check-in, the check-out. And you define it from start to finish. And I believe if you understand the process and you can measure it, you can improve it. So as soon as I was brought into the Venetian and I was in charge of training and development for all departments, I went in and I said, let's map every single process. in every single one of the 72 departments. So we went and we listed the gaming processes, and we broke them down in table games for Baccarat from start to finish. What are the steps from the beginning to the end of that guest cycle? And then we did the customer journeys, and we mapped all of these. And so this was something that I believe is extremely important to make your operation work well. You've got to make the intangible tangible. You got to map the process, and you got to measure every step of the way. Then you can improve it, and then put goals on it every quarter using what we used to do was the balance scorecard broken down into each of the 72 departments, and give really accountability to that department head to say, here's where you need to go, here's the support you're going to get, and we're going to get there. If you fall short, we'll give you more resources or more assistance to get there next time. But that's something I really believe in, and I think that it's a unique way of looking at service operations. I heard for years when I was back in university, the difference between manufacturing and services, that manufacturing is tangible, service is intangible. Incorrect. It's rubbish. It's an excuse not to measure and improve something. What they taught us in Ritz-Carlton and in mapping of service processes is, if you can see it, if you can hear it, if you can smell it, if you can taste it, or you can touch it, you can measure it. So for example, on a check-in, I can look at somebody, and the standards are they must greet me before I greet them, so I can hear that, yes or no. Smile, I can see that, did they smile or not? I can measure that. And what words did they use? Welcome, Mr. Scott, to the Venetian. How's your trip? I can measure that, and it's a yes or no criteria. I can put a number on it, and I can then improve it each time by measuring it that way. That can be done in the gaming process also. But when I arrived in Vegas, oh no, we don't want to do that. We don't want to bother the VIP or the customer. That was just a way of pushing us away from making the gaming service providers accountable and measurable in their service offerings. So we did it and observed it in a non-obtrusive way of the guest, and as a consequence, brought the service up, we believe, in Venetian to a level that had never been accomplished before in the gaming industry in Vegas. So I believe that my passion for that and real focus on putting those processes in place gently over years made a difference, and becoming basically somebody you focus on business process, business improvement, and bottom line then comes back as a result. Because with the balanced scorecard, you're making sure you're taking care of the customer, you're taking care of the team member, you're doing the financial results, and there is this learning component in the traditional balanced scorecard. We used to replace that with a quarterly goal that was extremely important, like opening up a VIP room or eliminating cost in this particular area. And it made real differences. And then their bonuses were attached to that. So I like to look at business systems as a whole and make sure we're moving in the right direction.
Now, what would you say would be the main differences between opening a property in the US versus Macau?
The biggest, I believe, is the availability of resources, from human resources to systems resources to support companies. So, for example, when you would open up in Las Vegas, there are already 160,000 rooms being serviced by a whole team of individuals that have been working there for a number of years. And if you opened up a really exciting new project with great wage and benefits package like the Venetian, you'd be able to attract people from an existing pool, a very large pool. You would also be able to attract people from the hospitality industry elsewhere with no visa problems. You weren't looking for blue cards and everything else. You had a huge pool of human resources to draw from. Also, for example, we would outsource a hell of a lot of stuff in Las Vegas that wasn't our profit center. So, for example, laundry, dry cleaning, outsourced totally. And there was a number of huge companies that have been doing it for decades there. You could call them up, you'd have a contract within a week, and within 6 months, the process would be set up and ready to help you operate. When you went on to IT support services, there were lots and lots of companies there, and the software was written in English for the US dollar, ready to launch in the United States. Given those two examples and the human resource one, and pulling it over to Macau, one of the first challenges we had straight away was there was still very low employment in 2004. And we had a directive that we followed in the Venetian, which was we were not going to hire anybody from SJM, STDM, because we didn't want to cause upset in the market and to be perceived as coming in and stealing the best people. So we made a commitment also that we were going to do over 86% of our people were going to be local. So it became very, very difficult. We got to have to hire for attitude and get the locals in as much as possible, and then hire specific skill sets from abroad to start working on training and development those individuals to be ready to hit the operation that we were going to do. So for example, some of the systems we brought in, we had over 187 IT systems running concurrently in the Venetian and Vegas. We had to move them over to Macau. But the first challenge is they were all written in English and they were written for US dollar. So the first thing is we had not got double character recognition on any of our systems. So we went to our current system suppliers and said, can you help us please put a front end on this that allows us to put in Chinese characters. Oh, and by the way, US dollar is not going to work over here, so we need to have Hong Kong dollar, MOP, etc. put in to the system. Now, these are very, very complicated because these systems, again, have been built over decades and were ready to roll in the States. And there was a huge cost in modifying them. So we had to go shopping around to the different companies to say who's willing to put in the investment to upgrade these things for us, and then we'll buy your systems. So there was an argument they wanted us to pay for them, etc. So that was a huge challenge. So getting the human resources, getting the systems modified for here, and then support services. So for example, there's huge companies in America that, let's say, for example, you call them up, they have a massive list of food and beverage items, and with ordering with one company, you can knock out maybe 1,200 items you need on a day-to-day basis in mass quantity. Those companies didn't exist in Macau. And we had some funny stories with that. So for example, we put in an order, the chef was telling me they put in an order with the company for the eggs, and they said they faxed it off in 2004 in Macau, and the order was for 14,000 eggs. So the supplier, the largest supplier, called up the chef and said, "I'm sorry, I think you've missed a decimal point here. How many do you need?" It's 14,000. That's for today, and we'll need 24,000 for Saturday and Sunday for the buffet. There was a silence on the end of the phone, followed by, in Cantonese, something like, "I'll call you back." The phone went down, and mad panic then ensued with that supplier in Macau, wondering, "I just got the biggest order of my life. I'm going to do whatever I can to fulfill it." But he did not have the supplies. He did not have the logistics. He did not have the trucks, the refrigeration, or anything to do it. So when those first orders arrived, they were arriving in little high-ace vans in the back of mopeds. Little old ladies were coming in with bags of eggs. They were coming from everywhere. I know I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it was similar to this. So just imagine we were coming with these massive supply demands to hit before those suppliers only had to give smaller amounts to what was in existence. And it was a huge upset to the business. So it was challenging.
Funny you mentioned that. It reminds me of when we first started World Gaming Magazine in 2009. So, how many copies do you want to print? We said 50,000. Same thing. We've never printed more than 2,500.
Yeah.
So you talk there about the 2004, those early days. It was SJM, and then it was Sands, obviously opened in 2004, STDM, I should say, and then Sands opened in 2004. You worked for both of those companies in the early days. Can you give us some story? I mean, I know it was everybody was going and having a drink after work at that bar up in Grand Lapa, and you know those early days there would have been very few people from overseas. Give us some stories from 04, 05.
When we arrived first, it was a big learning curve. It was about 6 weeks out from the opening of Sands. And first thing we had to do was go in and do a temperature check. We had to go around every single department and quickly assess, where are we? Are we ready to open in 6 weeks' time? So it was funny. We were in the Grand Lapa now, but what used to be the Mandarin Orient, in the coffee shop, Cafe Bella Vista. And there was about 50 of us there. And we said, right, you go check this out, you check this out. And we'll all meet back at lunch, and then we'll meet again for a debrief at the end of the day. So we all had our brief. We went off. And they said, now, remember, be gentle, go in, observe, find out what you can, come back, then we realize what are the priorities that we really need to get. So off we went. We met with the different departments to different levels of surprise and astonishment. Some departments were way ahead and perfectly ready to go. And there was a few departments that needed a lot of help. And there was one or two departments that we've got a problem here. So we met back at lunchtime and we went around the table and they said, well, how did it go? And it was really interesting because everybody had a different experience, but mine was quite startling. I had to look into the uniform situation. And so I went in, and within an hour and a half, I had to just jump in already and get going and pulling everyone together because it was so far behind. So we were 6 weeks out. We had 3,600 staff. Each staff was supposed to have 3 complete uniforms each. So I add that up. And only 115 people had been fitted.
Oh dear.
So we had a bit of an issue. So this is an example of the type of things that just shocked us. So we had to jump right in and say, okay, we have to go to, not plan B, because there was no plan B. We had to make up something totally different because the uniforms were taking 8 weeks to produce per cycle. So anyway, we jumped in and we worked with the team to make it happen. Now, it wasn't their fault because the leadership that was there in many cases where I sort of distinguish sometimes, there's 3 types. You know, you get the hybrids, but you get a maintainer, a person who's worked in a hotel that's already been open and maybe worked there for many, many years, and they like a certain pace, and that's their thing. There could be a GM in a hotel for 20 years, but never did an opening. Then you've got openers who get really impatient with these long jobs of just doing the same thing and be bored stiff. And they like to go on and do these openings, and they're high adrenaline people who want a lot of action. And then you got the hybrids who can do both, you know. And we had a number of maintainers hired with experience around the hotel, but had never done an opening because nobody ever bothered to ask them the question, did you ever do an opening? So they're where we're running into difficulties. Now, you know, it's a huge amount of these really high level, high volume project management skills that are needed in these big openings. And that's what was lacking. And they were running it like a pre-shift briefing every morning at 9 o'clock. How's everyone doing? Fine. Any emergencies? No. Off you go. Believing in the team that it was a set up regular operation. And that's where we ran into some huge difficulties. And that's something that it was part of that first iteration and had to be overcome. Because what I always find in an opening is you'll learn 100 times more in an opening than you will in 5 years of regular operations because it's routine, it's going along. But you get stuff coming at you and all sorts of surprises, and it's how you deal with them and being action oriented to get over it and make it happen. That's really required. So if you've got somebody who's shy, reserved, sits back a little bit, has a culture where they don't want to question the boss and where they're not going to doggedly stand forward and bring a point forward that they know is critical because it's not culturally acceptable, you've got an extra challenge. So we had that cultural issue as well, where there was a lot of individuals who just, I'll follow the boss. I'm not going to rock the boat here. And then it was getting dangerously late to fix issues, you know. So it was very interesting.
What about, I mean, obviously we're stuck in, you're talking about like, you know, times where you learn things. We're learning a lot now, right? We're stuck in, for people who are watching this years later, this is COVID-19 time right now. We're right stuck in the middle of it. And, you know, we've got a recovery ahead of us. I mean, what are your comments? I mean, on COVID-19 generally, this whole coronavirus thing generally, and also more specifically, when we do come back, we're not back yet, we're far from it, but when we do come back, things will be different. You know, how will they be different? You know, VIP might play more of a role certainly early on, but just generally in coronavirus, and you're stuck up there in Mongolia at the moment as well.
Yeah.
You can't get back. I mean, all of us are stuck where we're stuck, you know, can't be travel. Any comments on that, on generally the time and how it affects the industry? Yeah,
I think in general, it's been just unprecedented. It's really hard to believe. I've been sitting here a number of days thinking, how has this happened? We came here for a little annual health checkup and a retreat for 10 days in January. Supposed to fly back on February 8th. Flight was cancelled again. There was no way in and out. They locked down the borders. And I haven't been able to get out because although there were some flights out, I couldn't get a connecting flight within the 24 hours back to either Hong Kong or Macau. So I've been here. So you make the most of it where you are. I always do that. So we've been doing great projects up here. But nobody has ever seen anything like it. But as a response, I think that the hospitality industry, with our service ethic and our way and ability to put processes and procedures in place, are probably in the best position of all to recover from this in a very solid, tangible way because of what we can put in place. We can put in, we make suites and rooms impeccably neat and clean every single day, spotlessly. Our housekeeping and environmental departments are incredible. So we'll be able to get these places squeaky clean. We've got great security and access control. So we'll be able to make sure anybody coming in and out is checked, temperature checked, etc. Do they have their tests valid, etc. And they're not very innovative in what we apply. So for example, we've been working on bringing in specific solutions. These, it's called Colvix, this beautiful product that allows to keep your environment sanitized for 30 days and then just regularly clean it. These type of things need to be put in place all throughout, but I think we're very well positioned to do that. So if you look at another service organization, like a bank, for example, they don't have the same skill sets, they don't have the same resources. They'll call an outside cleaning company and hope for the best. I think that too many of these big companies rely on someone like the Eco Labs or Rentokil or something to come in and solve the whole problem for them. We go to a next level and we make sure there's a service element to that, not just bringing in cleaners, scrubbing it up and leaving and putting a sticker there to say it's safe. I think, first of all, the integrated resort industry, especially at the level we're developed in Macau, is at a very, very top level of response to this, and will do it better than most industries, I believe, apart from a sterile pharmacy environment. They're at another level, right? When it comes to the movement of people, we've seen it all over the world where they're applying these different methods to different levels of success. And I'm just shocked that they're still letting a lot of people in and out of certain countries. And they're surprised that the virus is still growing. I think that the approach that Macau has taken and how they've gone about it has been the best. I think it's the gold standard as far as I'm concerned. I haven't seen any other country doing it as well. And they're moving very cautiously and very carefully and not making the mistakes that everyone else does and just opening that border too quickly. You get a rush of people who haven't been tested and you've got cases again and you've got another spike. You saw the issues there in Hong Kong. It's an extremely difficult situation. It's going to be very difficult to manage. But I think that Macau's gone about it the absolute right way and keeping it close, keeping it tidy, and restricting access from outside possible contagion areas is the way to go. Now, what's going to come back quickest? Well, you know, we break our market down and we normally talking about the VIP market, the premium mass and the mass. Do you want the mass at this point in time? Do you want the premium mass? Maybe to a little extent, but you would prefer to have the VIP because you're talking about fewer numbers. You can control their movements possibly. You can put nice, comfortable processes in place where they feel comfortable, yet they know they're extremely safe. So you see these options maybe on the table game floor. We have these perspex separators. Personally, I hate that. I think it's separating the individuals, but are there other alternatives to keep it safe? Well, not if you've got 60 people flooding the table. And you're not going to be able to control the numbers on the table games as much unless you shut down every second table and only put maybe 3 seats per table. There are other ways of doing it. There are very highly sophisticated air filtration systems that create like an air wall in a unit between the chairs that can actually prevent the movement and the cross-contamination possibly as effectively as the plexiglass screens. So there's a lot of things you could put in a VIP environment. So control the numbers coming in and out, ensure that there's the wearing of masks, everyone's tested. And these top VIPs are as careful and as cautious as anybody else. They don't want to feel that they're going into a dangerous, dirty environment. And you can have constant cleaning and use of materials that can make it a lot safer. So I think it should come back slowly. We should start with the VIP, small amount of premium, and then in the mass, it's got to be really spread out. So the difficulty there is your ROI is based on numbers and volume. So you're going to have to be adjusting some figures here over the next quarters to make sure this works. And the casinos have been great in retaining staff, keeping everyone on board and doing the best they can and keeping the whole thing moving. I do think it's going to be a slow recovery, and it's got to be careful, because I think there has been a warning. If we have one case, they'll shut down the casinos again. So we gotta make sure we do it well, do it right, and don't rush. And the same goes with getting to the casino. If it's third-party providers like an outsourced service company we're leasing the buses from, how do we make sure they're ensuring that the buses are absolutely hygienic and, you know, there's social distancing, etc., and that they're keeping those environments safe? I think it's extremely important. So it goes the whole supply chain along from I think the airlines in Macau and how they're restricting flights coming in and out of Macau right now is very good. It's very tight. Other airlines around the world, they're not doing that. They're allowing people fly in and out of places without checks in the United States, etc. Well, what if they show up now in Taiwan and then pop over to Macau? You know, you've got an issue. So we've got to keep it tight and controlled here as long as we feel is necessary, you know, in Macau, I believe.
Niall, you said sorry, just changing tack completely now. You came to Macau, obviously, 2004 for the opening of Sands Macau. 16 years later, you haven't gone anywhere other than Mongolia. But, you know, you're still in Macau. And you've got Murray International now, and you've got Premier Bar, one of the top night spots in Macau that we all love to go for a drink. Is that sort of side of things that you do? Is that a bit of your labour of love? Can you tell us a bit about that journey as well?
Yes, well, you know, I love when I came to Macau, what I discovered was there was a lot of missing pieces to supply and support the casino industry and the integrated resort industry. So I saw a lot of opportunities there to sort of support businesses that could help. So in some cases, I went in as a partner or a director to help set up certain companies like laundry companies or dry cleaning companies, etc., service company, outsourced service supply companies, to allow them to set up operations that would help the big operations work effectively. Because often they were putting in place, there was requests for proposals going out, and the small local companies didn't know how to reply to them. So the big operators were looking at these and says, this isn't going to work. So in the early days when I became an independent of Murray International, I helped some of these small companies put together their business plans, their strategies, and how they were going to set up their operations to meet the requirements. And then when the RFP came in, they went, aha, these guys seem to know what we're looking for. So that was some consulting work helping companies with that. I found that it was very difficult when I was in Sands. I wanted to put in the best of the best in the bars, but all that was available was just run-of-the-mill, two big distribution companies were dominating the market, bringing in Diageo products and bringing in Pernod Ricard products, and on the food and beverage side. And it was like, it's okay, but it was humdrum. What I wanted to do was bring in what I would consider what's the cutting edge, what's the best of the best, what's the latest thing coming out, or the rarest thing that should be available. So I set up back in 2006 Premier Hospitality and started to look at importing the best spirits, wines, and beers that I could find and bring them to the market, and that was really enjoyable. And as it moved forward, I enjoyed going to a lot of the bars and the restaurants. But one of the things that I really prided myself on is the Irish are really well known for our bars and enjoying the bars and having fun in the bars. What I found is the places here were the new ones that were coming on, the integrated resorts, were just run of the mill. You could have been in a hotel bar anywhere in the world, but it had no identity with Macau, and it wasn't really fun, and there was no personalization to it, and they were following strict standard operating procedures, but they were dull. They weren't relaxing. You felt you had to put a suit and tie on to go into the integrated resorts. And there was a lovely Irish bar here, Glenn McCartney's lovely little the Irish bar over in Taipa, and we used to enjoy going there, and it was fun. And that was where we used to go and relax. and there were very few other offerings. But over the years, then we got an opportunity to take over a bar in Taipa in 2015, and what we wanted to do there was give it some unique and really nice products, a very relaxed atmosphere, but somewhere where you could go after work, take your tie off and relax in a more sophisticated offering, but in a very casual, relaxed atmosphere. And that's what we tried to create there, because I felt that that was really missing in the offering that was here. And so I really enjoy that. Yeah, it's a passion of mine. I really love good food and good beverage. I've been buying and putting together wine lists and beverage lists for these big companies for years, with Ritz-Carlton, Four Seasons. And yeah, they're great, but they're corporate oriented. And oftentimes my argument with them was, you're not localizing these. They insisted we had certain red and white wines at the Ritz-Carlton in New York City based on a determination in Atlanta in the head office. And I said, this doesn't work. The client here in New York is far more sophisticated than these two house wines. And they wouldn't listen. And that used to annoy me. So when we opened the Premier, I try and take care of what the local wants and needs are and offer them something special and new without any corporate restraints. So it's between me and my partner, Baller. We decide what we do and how we do it. And it's great freedom. And if you're locked into a corporate environment, sometimes it can be frustrating, but it's lovely to have this outlet where you can do what you feel is right and do your little passion project, you know.
I can certainly attest, Niall, to your bar. I've been there many a time, and we had one of IAG's MAD events, Macau After Dark, down there, and it is one of the few places in Macau that's really got its own identity. And I mean, I thought far from being an expert, but I thought I knew a thing or two about food and beverage. But boy, have you introduced me to a lot of different drinks down there that I'd never heard of before or never understood, and a lot of them are fantastic. So, full credit to you to making our lives in Macau a little bit richer in introducing
thank you.
Some of these great products. Yeah. Hey, I'm conscious of the fact we haven't got too much more time, but there's a couple of subjects I really do want to ask you about. I'll give you the shortest question ever. One word: Japan.
Yes, Japan. I've been passionate about Japan for the last 2.5 years. And as you well know, I went over and joined you on many occasions and meetings there. I think that Japan is a fantastically intriguing market. Feel that it's got huge potential with regards to the big population and the sophistication of it and everything else. I've been back and forward. Joined the Japan Gaming Conference and was very eagerly listening to everything the government had to say and offer and what the locals wanted and were looking for. Got a big translation of the first draft laws and all the proposals from the different prefectures. Went to visit Wakayama and met with the Chambers of Commerce and got their feeling for what they wanted there. Went and talked to them in Sasebo and Nagasaki, the Chambers of Commerce, and again, the government officials. What is it you're looking for? What do you need? And then back to Yokohama as well, and had an opportunity to speak with some of the consultant groups that have been hired by the government in those different places, including Osaka, and asked them, where are you? Where do you want to go? What do you want this to be? And then getting the feel of the local market, where how keen are they for this and which businesses are interested in getting involved, etc. And it was a huge learning curve and it was great. And then I was privileged to be asked to speak at the National Diet on the subject of the development of the MICE component of the integrated resorts, and spoke there, and Caesar's Palace also came in and talked to them about the MICE business and where they feel it is now, where it needs to go with regards to integrated resorts, and got a great feeling. I was very excited and it was progressing very, very, very well. And this COVID-19 situation has caused so many changes in the government's mind and in in the reality of running the country. So first of all, to have to turn around and say they have to postpone the Olympics was a major blow to the country and to any country who would have put so much into it, because they were doing an amazing job. Then there were a couple of other issues when the COVID issue came up in Yokohama with the docking of the ship. Other issues came up and said, well, if you can't handle a ship, how are you going to handle the Olympics? And a lot of other complications came out of that. Then you had a number of operators going for the different jurisdictions. It's very complicated, right? So 72 prefectures were eligible to apply for an IR license, but only 3 were going to get it. So what happened is all these different international operators and local partnerships wanted to come forward and say, why don't I work with this prefecture? We'll put a proposal to the national government and maybe they'll pick us. That was a very expensive, very complicated, very convoluted process. And a lot of international operators had to spend an awful lot of money traipsing around the country trying to figure out which was the best opportunity for them and should they go for it. And quite frankly, I think a lot of people got annoyed by that process over time. And then it dragged out. And then prefectures started to drop out. And then operators started to drop out. And then you had a situation where you never even had a competitive competition in Osaka anymore because everybody dropped out except MGM. Now, even the government scratched their head and said, what do we do now? We can just put together a proposal with MGM because that's all we have. But how is that going to look fair as a competitive process to the national government? Because the national government doesn't figure out how they're going to select either. Then you had issues where the attention turned to Yokohama. Now you've got some issues right now where some of the opposing individuals who are against IRs have put together groups who are now trying to petition against the governor, or the mayor who's brought in because she didn't disclose she was into IRs before she got elected. Now they're saying that she went in under false pretenses. And now if they get 500,000 signatures, they may be able to depose her basically and get her out. And there's the IR in jeopardy in Yokohama. So you've got these issues going on, and now you've got more pulling out. So the number one, in my view, I favored towards Venetian and what they do in certain ways. But one of the biggest bidders for Yokohama was Venetian, and they did the numbers. They looked at the basic policy, the rules of the 30% tax and the 30% income tax, and the minimum investments of. They were looking at close to 10 billion, but then they'd only got a license for 10 years. How can you get loans on a 10-year payback on 10 billion? All of these things built up to a ROI, which was not going to be workable with their numbers. They're looking for at least 26% ROI on their investments, and that just wasn't going to happen with those numbers. Now, they pulled out and said, we don't know what your final basic law is, because you're supposed to have printed it in March. We still haven't seen it. So I think there's a number of companies still open and ready to look at it. But I believe that there's going to be a delay. I think they're going to pull back. And unless they dramatically change the terms and conditions of the basic law, it's not going to attract enough big players. They may attract some smaller second and third tier integrated resort developers, but the impact won't be anywhere the same. It'll be a little European-style casino with some type of regular holiday resort attached to it, and it's not going to make the impact that the big IRs and the dream they originally had was to bring the revenue sources that you have in places like Macau and Singapore to Japan. It's not going to happen with second and third-rate players, I believe. So there is some, of course, there's hope that it's going to be turned around, but I think it's going to be delayed, and it needs to really be reviewed if you want to revive it.
I think you and I could probably do 1 hour on Japan. We're both very passionate about it, and it is a great sort of shame what's going on at the moment, because I agree with you, the upside is huge. I think Galaxy looks very solid at the moment, and Sun City have done surprisingly a lot better than people expect down in Wakayama, and we could talk on that for hours. We haven't got time. We've probably only got time for one more sort of decent question, Niall. I wanted to ask you about Dr. Stanley Ho. Obviously passed away earlier this year, a few months ago, and at the age of 98, and was just an amazing legend. And we've all, what can I say that hasn't already been said? But you had some personal interaction with him. Certainly worked at STDM back in those days. Any stories on Dr. Ho, or any comments?
Well, I would just say I was in awe of him, and only got to interact with him on a couple of occasions in meetings that I wasn't interacting with him directly. I was in his presence, etc. But he was amazing, and his influence throughout STDM and SGM was amazing. I remember back when we came in 2004, we'd sit down and we'd say, how do we describe STDM, SJM when we were in sales? Because we were quite wary of it, and we thought, this is the lore, and we called it the castle on the hill. And it was what goes on in there. you know, and over decades, how everything was built. You couldn't come in and out of Macau without coming in on one of his ferries, or the airline Air Macau with his control in it, etc., and on the bus service, etc. And it was just amazing. So when I got the opportunity, I joined Joint Ventures New Business in November 2006. It was just prior to the opening of Grand Lisboa, and we were asked to help do the critical path process and get the doors open. And the systems and processes in place were so different to what I was used to. It was just paradise going into it, because now it was a whole new game to understand. And how did it operate? How did it work? And it was an empire built on family, as far as I could see. And it was family everywhere, and there was very close relationships. So it was family, or it was business relationships, or whatever. It was just incredible how it all melded together and worked so well. And going through the processes, we were doing simple things like procurement at the beginning. And so uniforms came up again, because I always check them after the Sands episode. And they said that all the uniforms are being produced by this company. And I said, okay, well, you know, looking at the numbers, this looks quite high. This number per uniform is quite expensive. So I said, let's do a 3-bid. Let's see what other companies can come back with. And I was pulled onto the carpet and sat down, and I was told, you will not do a 3-bid process. This company will supply the uniforms. And I said, well, I just want to point out, I know it's been determined, but I want to point out the differences in prices. Let's say $90 versus what we were used to, about $60 per uniform. And I was pushed a piece of paper in front with Dr. Stanley Ho's signature on there, and told, that's the contract, don't argue it. I said, okay, but can I please get the information forward that although it's Dr. Stanley Ho's intention to give that exclusive contract to that group, I'm sure you would not be happy to know that they are charging over market price. Can you please get that message to them? Well, leave it to me, we'll get that message through. A day later, Dr. Stanley Ho called up those other individuals, the 3-bid was put in place, and it was a huge modification in prices. And this was still when it was a private company, obviously before it went public. But the issue is, he was a very kind, generous man who took care of everybody, but he was a businessman, and he didn't want people trying to take advantage of the situation or anything else. And that was really, really key. Amazing individual. I remember one other time there was, we were reminded that our job is to keep the peace and not to ruffle too many feathers. If the system is working, it was often taking care of different elements of the family or the system, and we weren't to go in roughshod and try and over costs or price to mess it up. We were there to keep the ecosystem working and not disturb it by damaging that ecosystem. And it was just incredible. The way it was so complex, so involved, so deep, very difficult to understand, but so effective. Amazing. Whole different way of approaching things. He's the master.
I just want to, but we're running out of time, Niall, but just one thing that, you know, everybody works in the industry in Macau is very aware of the Irish connection in Macau. Quite a strong Irish presence in the industry anyway, at least. Can you talk a bit about why is that? And do you guys have a bit of a bond because of that?
You know, it's been really interesting that everyone's slagging and saying it's an Irish bond and everything else. None of us knew each other before we came here. And I think that one of the things that's really key that you'll notice in each of the individuals that you know here, so if you're looking at Mr. Ian Coughlin over in Wayne, and Kieran Carruthers also in Wayne, and Mr. Frank McFadden, and Glenn McCartney also in the tourism section and everything else. The Irish are renowned for hospitality. We love it. It's in our heart. It's what we believe in. And we really, really focus on hospitality, how to take care of people, how to make them feel welcome, how to ensure that the problems are overcome and you don't have to worry about them. And I think as a generic trait, that's what we're good at. Now, each of us started in different places around the world, but we use that as well as our dogged determination. We're very determined people. We like an uphill battle. We like to fight against the odds. We like to do what also in a little bit McGregor's a bit pompous about it with his, I didn't come here to take part, I came here to take over. We've all got a little bit of that in the back of our head, but we like to do it in a nice, hospitable way, you know. We're very determined people, and we like to lead, and we like to get it done, you know.
I think the Irish, there's a great, a bit like the Australians, you know, you find them everywhere all over the world. You know, there's a great diaspora of Irish. Doesn't matter what country you go in, there's always an Irish bar or a local Irishman made good, I think, all over the world. Well, Niall, we've probably got a little bit over time, but it's been fantastic to talk to you. And I think Ben and I, we didn't get too many words in. We got a bunch of other questions we'd like to ask you as well. We could easily go for another hour, but that would we better not do that. So thank you so much for being being on our podcast.
Very much. Thank you very much, Andrew, and thank you very much, Ben. It was a pleasure. I hope to get back to see you soon. I'm trying to fly back this month, and if so, we can follow up with a few drinks at Premier.
Well, I'd love to have one of your infused gins, all those lovely infused gins you have there at Premier, but they're fantastic. It'd be great to see you in person and have a quiet one. So thanks, and thanks for joining me, Ben, as well. Thanks, and
Of course.
yeah, and we'll see you all next time on the IAG
Thank
podcast,
you.
whenever that may happen to be. So I hope you all enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.
Excellent. Bye. Signing out from Ulaanbaatar. Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye-bye. See you all.